As we head into this fall season of epic upon epic game releases, whether it be Borderlands 3, Death Stranding, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, there are a lot of major titles being released. However, that also means a lot of the more underrated games are going to get swept under the radar, and I'm going to try to do my best to bring light to some of those games that I do think are going to go a little bit under the radar. And in today's video, I want to cover the new RPG coming from Spiders, a studio that has some recognition, but not a ton. They've worked on a couple of games, namely Technomancer and Mars Warlogs. However, they're bringing out a brand new game with the help of Focus Home Interactive, the publisher, in GREEDFALL. GREEDFALL looks like a very good RPG, albeit definitely a little bit lower budget than, say, the biggest budget RPGs. If you look at a Witcher 3 or some of the other major RPGs that have been released this generation, you could tell that this game, while it does look impressive in certain regards, you could also tell that they had a finite budget to work with, and that's absolutely fine. Not every game is going to have a significant budget, and it really depends on how fleshed out of an experience GREEDFALL is. Now, why I wanted to talk about this game specifically right now is because we're about to come up on the release of Monster Hunter World Iceborne, a major expansion to what is considered to be an RPG in Monster Hunter World. On September 13th, we have the release of Borderlands 3, another major RPG. It goes without saying that those two games are going to do incredibly well from a commercial standpoint and a critic standpoint. It's going to be received very well. I think it's a foregone conclusion on that end. Unfortunately for GREEDFALL, timing is of a little bit of an issue with this one. It's being released on September 10th in between those two releases. And timing-wise, I don't think you could have picked a worse day to be released on. However, it is what it is. They gotta get the game out when it's ready, and they gotta pick a date that does fit them the best. And in this case, September 10th just worked out for GREEDFALL, which is a little bit of a bummer, and I do see that affecting it a little bit commercially. However, some positives about GREEDFALL: it is being released at a more budget price point than a typical RPG release. At a typical game release, it'll be $49.99 instead of $59.99. Would have loved to see it hit a $39.99 price point. I think if it was $40, it would have hit that threshold of it being like World War Z, and you just go into the store and realize, hey, there's this new RPG coming out. It's only $40. Let me check it out. I think at $50, it's kind of in that in-between phase where I don't think $50 is going to make a lot of people jump over, but nonetheless, that's just me going on a tangent about the pricing of the game. At the very least, it's nice that it's not a full $60 release. So what is expected in GREEDFALL? Well, it notes engage in a core role-playing experience and forge the destiny of a new world seeping with magic and filled with riches, lost secrets, and fantastic creatures, with diplomacy, deception, and force becoming part of a living, evolving world, influence its course and shape your story. Now, GREEDFALL is following a very similar path to a lot of games these days in that choice is a big imperative notion in this game. That's going to lend to the game being very replayable. Not only from a story standpoint is choice going to be impactful, but also from a character development standpoint. The game notes complete freedom in character progression, play as a male or female, customize your appearance, and freely choose your abilities, spells, and skills. And it seems like there is going to be a lot of depth into the specific choices you make, and that again is going to lend to the game being relatively replayable. Now, of course, story is going to be a big element of this game, and I'll give you a general consensus of the story. An island paradise has been discovered by colonial forces from several distinct nations from fictional lands, but with magic and monsters. You play as a neutral human who recently arrived at the island, able to ally yourself with either the native elves who inhabit the island or any of the foreign nations competing to conquer and colonize the new land. So obviously, with a lot of sides being able to be taken, there's going to be a ton of decision making in this game, and how exactly you navigate the game, it's going to be very different player to player, and that's going to make the game relatively engaging, I think, the whole way through. And the game is set in a 17th century styled fantasy setting, so it looks very unique from that standpoint. I do really want to talk a little bit about Spiders as a studio, because I've been saying when talking about GREEDFALL that this might be the game that puts them on the map. They aren't a studio that's as well known as a BioWare, a CD Projekt Red, nowhere near close, although with BioWare falling off a little bit, you know, Spiders probably doesn't want to go the BioWare route at this point, but nonetheless, there are other games in Mars Warlogs and Technomancer. Those are the two I really want to note. They also did Bound by Flame. Bound by Flame was not a very good game. Had some interesting elements, but I do think that was more of a miss. In the case of Mars Warlogs and Technomancer was a game that released back in 2016, and it wasn't received incredibly well by the critics. However, I personally thought it was a pretty decent game with a very unique sci-fi RPG setting. Is it worth a full $50 or $60? Absolutely not, but it's a game that I often tell people, go back and check it out if you're a fan of RPG. Don't expect something on the caliber of the best RPGs ever released, but Spiders, in my opinion, did a surprisingly great job with Technomancer, albeit it did have its issues. It was an interesting game nonetheless, nonetheless, they go for some unique elements, and that's why I'm captivated by Spiders as a studio, because I do know that they're gonna step outside of the typical norms for an RPG, and they'll try to implement some interesting elements. Now, some of those are gonna hit, some of those are not gonna hit. That just goes with any creative art form when you do try to do something unique, so in that sense, hey, I give them some credit for having some balls and trying some stuff different. Mars Warlogs was also a very good game. If you're a PlayStation gamer, chances are you never played the game. I do believe it saw a release on the PlayStation 3, don't quote me on that, but it's mostly known for its PC release, and it was a pretty interesting game. It was a cyberpunk RPG on Mars. Again, another title that had its fair share of issues, but it was an interesting game nonetheless. That released all the way back in 2013, and that's really the first notable Spiders title. GREEDFALL is a game that I think, from a quality standpoint, while it doesn't have that gigantic budget to work with, from a visual standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint, it does seem to have a lot going for it. And they actually did recently just release a 14-minute gameplay trailer, which, after the conclusion of this video, will transition to some raw gameplay out of that, and it looked pretty good, although you could tell that there are some issues of the game where they couldn't completely flesh out some of the elements. Like, there is some redundant dialogue during the combat. Some of the combat visuals aren't the best. However, I think those elements can be largely forgoed if the core experience is really good, and that's what GREEDFALL is often described as. It has you engage in a core role-playing experience, and if those core elements are intact, and if those core elements are of quality, then a lot of people are going to end up enjoying GREEDFALL. Now, do I expect this game to do incredibly well from day one? It's just got a hard road ahead of it, with it being sandwiched right between Iceborne and Borderlands 3. I remember when I originally saw this game's release date, the trigger went off in my head, and I'm like, wait a minute, September 10th for an RPG release? When does Borderlands 3 come out? September 13th? When does Iceborne come out? September 6th? Alongside all of the other major releases coming out in September? But you're just heightening that competition element by being released in between two RPGs. Now, if it's released with immense quality, that is not going to matter. If a game is of high enough quality and people want to go out and play it, they'll find a way to play it, even if it is a title that some people wait on a sale for. And honestly speaking, this is the type of game, because Spiders has had a little bit of a mixed reception with their prior games, maybe wait and see how the reviews turn out, maybe wait and see how I talk about the game, because I'm going to be picking it up on day one, because I pick up the majority of games on day one, and I'll definitely be checking it out, because if it's something like a Fable style experience or something of that sense, I think it could turn out to be pretty well from that standpoint, and I want to see more established studios in the market. It's clear as day that Spiders wants to be a notable RPG development studio, and hey, more RPGs on the market, would anybody be against that? I don't think so. So I'm hoping for the best out of GREEDFALL. Wanted to give you guys a little bit of an insight on this game. I'm excited for it. Hopefully some of you guys at the very least will keep it on your wish list. As I mentioned, that's going to conclude this video, but do enjoy some raw gameplay out of the recent 14-minute gameplay demo, and let us know what you think in the comments section. Is this a game you're going to pick up right away like me, or are you going to wait a little bit? Are you planning on playing an Iceborne or a Borderlands 3, and maybe that's going to take up the majority of your time? I'm really interested in that specifically. How big of an impact is GREEDFALL being released on that day to you guys actually checking out the game, or does that not impact you at all? Sound off with your thoughts in the comment section down below. Enjoy about 5 minutes of gameplay and let us know all of your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
We'd better find somewhere to set up camp nearby, although it looks like we'll have a small fight on our hands first. Looking at some of the UI elements at the top of the screen, we have our red health bar, blue mana bar, and yellow fury bar. Casting magic depletes our mana pretty quickly, which is why it's beneficial to put a few skill points into equipping melee weapons. This way, when out of mana or wanting to conserve it, you can switch to a different weapon when it naturally replenishes over time. As you can see, fights are in real time, with a mix of magic, close and long-ranged combat. There's also an optional tactical pause which we haven't shown yet, but we'll go into more detail later. Over there is a rather more fearsome foe, a magical guardian intrinsically linked with the island and revered by its natives. For the sake of showing off some more combat, we can try taking it on in a fight, but first let's set up camp just around the corner. You might have noticed the shield icons over the HP bars, including that of our foe. These indicate your opponent's armor, which must be whittled away before you can start dealing significant damage. The Fury bar builds up by dealing damage to enemies, rewarding aggressive play. The built-up Fury can then be used to unleash devastating attacks. We've just fallen victim to one of the Guardian's poison attacks, so let's trigger the tactical pause. From this menu, we can quickly use an antidote to remove the poison effect, along with other consumables, actions, spells and techniques. You can also bind everything in the tactical pause menus to a specific button or key. This way, it's easy to play combat entirely in real-time action, to take a more methodic, strategic approach, or a mix of both. Potions, healing magic from your allies, parrying and dodging are all important when it comes to staying alive during tougher battles. Note that with this build, quick dodges have been upgraded to lightning dashes, while we have a divine magic ring equipped. This is only possible thanks to our investment into magic skills. We've managed to bring the Guardian down, and
Follow it.
it sounds like there might be another tent nearby. Perhaps we can find more answers by following this blood trail. But first, we've got another fight on our hands.
More blood. We are on the right path. Keep going.
You can see here the advantage of having skill points across more than one branch. After running out of mana to unleash powerful spells, we can switch to our sword to ensure we're always able to deal out damage.
A corpse. The clothes cannot be mistaken. It is a scholar of the Bridge Alliance. From the looks of him, I would say he has been dead for days, as we already thought. This isn't the woman whose journal we found. There is still a chance that she remains alive.
This man traded his life for all the suffering of my people.
He was only a scholar, a sage, not a warrior on the battlefield.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.